Say, folks, have you been following the perverse saga that is, or rather was, the Amber McLaughlin story? For starters, here's a photo of the adorable Amber. Now, I don't mean to be harsh here, but this particular Amber looks more like a red light to me. Indeed, wouldn't you say that Lady Amber comes across as a little bit, mannish? Well, your eyes aren't failing you, folks, because in the immortal words of Austin Powers,
that ain't no woman. It's a man.
Gee, could you even film such a scene like that these days without being hauled before some kangaroo court human rights tribunal and being charged with a thought crime? In any event, I am delighted to report that at around 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time last night, a certain procedure was embraced which now allows us to refer to Amber in the past tense. That's because this monster, who was serving time in a Missouri jail for first-degree murder, was sent to the great hereafter via lethal injection. Good riddance. Not that there wasn't a vigorous fight by the progressive left to save this chick with a dick. By the way, Amber McLaughlin's real name is Scott McLaughlin. That's because when he was born about a half century ago, nobody in their right mind would have dreamed of naming a bouncing baby boy as Amber. But in this young century, a moronic mantra endlessly uttered by those on the political left is, if it's trans, it's good, and if it's good, it's trans. And that's the crux of the matter when it comes to the McLaughlin story. After all, an inmate being put to death in the United States is hardly newsworthy. There are hundreds of prisoners on death row, several of whom are executed on an annual basis. The fact that a murderer was put to death in the USA is about as newsworthy as reporting that there is salt water in the Atlantic Ocean. But the Amber Scott saga is apparently newsworthy, we are told, because he's the first trans person to be executed, to which I have to say, who in blue hell cares? I'll leave it to your own devices to run a Google News search of this individual and dredge up the pathetic prose generated by the mainstream media. So much of it painted Scott as a really likable guy or gal or something. Check out this line from a CBS story, noting how a fellow inmate, Jessica Hinklin, described McLaughlin as, quote, a painfully shy person who came out of her shell after she decided to transition. She always had a smile and a dad joke. If you ever talked to her, it was always with the dad jokes, end quote. Oh, hardy har har. Stop it with those dad jokes already, Scotty boy. You're killing me. In any event, the mainstream media narrative suggested that executing Scott was in itself a crime because, well, he now dons female props and he identifies as a she, and as previously stated, if it's trans, it's good, and if it's good, it's trans. Indeed, in many respects, a scene from Family Guy is now proving to be eerily prescient.
Excuse me, ma'am. No porn at the bar.
Oh, it's okay. I'm transgender.
Oh, I had no idea. Do whatever you want all the time.
Yeah, do whatever you want all the time because Halloween is every day in our not-so-brave new world. Oh, I can hear some bleeding hearts right now reacting thusly. Oh, Menzies, why are you being so mean to this good time pal that really loves telling dad jokes and smiling? Oh, well, here's why. In many of the news stories covering the McLaughlin story, you have to drill down some 4 or 5 paragraphs to find out why Scotty Boy was on death row in the first place. You see, some 2 decades ago, Scott McLaughlin was convicted of killing 45-year-old Beverly Gunther. Gunther was McLaughlin's former girlfriend back when Amber was a he-him as opposed to a she-her. And it should also be noted, folks, that before he stabbed Beverly Gunther to death with a steak knife, Scott raped her. By the way, before she was murdered, Miss Gunther lived in constant fear of her life. Scott incessantly stalked her, and it was not uncommon for the police to escort Beverly from her office building to her car in the parking lot. But Scott McLaughlin, he eventually got his way, raping and killing Beverly, then placing her body in a garbage bag and dumping that bag in the Mississippi River as if this woman was nothing but a piece of trash. Now, that wasn't very ladylike of Scotty, wouldn't you say, folks? And that's the real story here, that a malicious and brutal and violent man finally got what was coming to him. But in the department of burying the lead, as we like to say in the journalism business, for so many in the mainstream media, the brutal murder Scott carried out was not the crux of the matter. Rather, the news peg was that since he was pretending to be a she, that means the state of Missouri should have granted this she-male thug clemency. Indeed, in media reports, it was noted that in his final written statement before going on an eternal date with the Grim Reaper, Scott wrote the following, quote, "I am a loving and caring person," end quote. Can you believe that rubbish?
That's an excerpt from my show every night. It's called The Ezra Levant Show. That's me, Ezra Levant. You can see the whole thing behind our paywall. Well, there's a lot of goodies behind there. I do a show every weeknight. My friends Sheila Gunn Reid and David Menzies and Nat and Kat have their shows too. You get a ton of content for just $8 a month. There's so much in there you won't find anywhere else. Go to rebelnewsplus.com.